Donald Trump recently took office as the United States president, which was most rejoiced by the Wolves fans. An old unconfirmed news clipping of Trump playing as the keeper for the Wolves Academy for as many as 6 matches spread around on the internet. This supposedly happened back in 1991 when his father was posted in the Midlands. While it seems highly unlikely, if true, it would have happened years before the MLS was even formed. Like with the metric system, Americans refuse to acknowledge the most logical sounding name for the sport and insist on calling it soccer. While they do get some other sports like basketball and baseball right, football arrived late and has taken some time to develop in the country. In recent years, and especially since Messi's arrival, MLS has gained unprecedented popularity across the globe. The league was recently in the midst of a controversy after FIFA decided to give a Club World Cup spot to Inter Miami, which is essentially Messi's team. They were given a host club slot after finishing on top of the table in the regular MLS season. But Inter Miami's early exit from the playoffs raised some questions. Did they deserve to represent the country in what is essentially a competition between the best clubs from every nation? Messi is cited as the reason for the bias in selection because his inclusion clearly blows up the revenue streams for the tournament stakeholders. The rules for the sport are the same over there, but the format is very different. This is why we've decided to dig deep and explain as simply as possible how the MLS works. It all kicked off in the 80s when the NASL, or North American Soccer League, collapsed. The early 80s economic decline and the differences with the player union left the United States without a top-flight league after 1984. The league had struggled through its existence, but had a golden period in the 70s when the New York Cosmos managed to sign the biggest names in the world. This included Pele, Beckham, and Cruyff, among others. In 1988, FIFA gave the United States the chance to host the World Cup 6 years later. This prompted the need to at least have a functional top-flight league in the country. In 1993, the MLS was founded, and 3 years later, the inaugural season was played. It started with just 10 teams and slowly picked up along the way. The United States and Canada came under the league's jurisdiction. But there was a considerable decline in the size of crowds after the very first season was held in 1996. This was narrowed down to 2 major reasons. Firstly, 8 of the 10 teams played in stadiums made for American football, which felt like a makeshift arena. Secondly, while the rules are identical now, that wasn't always the case, as the early years of the MLS saw various rule alterations to Americanize the game. A popular one was the shootouts in case of a draw. The ball was placed 35 yards from the goal, and the player was given 5 seconds to beat the goalkeeper. This was employed for the first 4 years, after which they switched to traditional penalty kicks. These early variations put off several traditional fans completely off the sport. The decline in viewership numbers early on led to financial troubles for many clubs, some of which had to be dissolved. In 2002, they switched to a single entity ownership structure to bring stability and prevent teams from spending out of their reach. The signings of Thierry Henry, David Beckham, and Zlatan Ibrahimovic were the most popular signings for the league in the modern era, until Messi, of course. MLS underwent a few changes in its format in 2007 to make it more competitive and entertaining. The MLS Cup playoffs were added to the mix, and the league was expanded to include even more teams across Canada and the USA. This is how the MLS currently operates. 29 teams take part in the league. These are divided into 2 leagues of sort. There's the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. 14 teams in the Western Conference and 15 in the East. From February to October, each team plays 34 matches. These include 2 matches against each team in the same conference and 8 matches against teams from the opposing conference. The first trophy to be awarded is the Supporters' Shield, which goes to the team on top of the table at the end of the 34 games. The Eastern and Western Conference tables are merged, and the top team wins the Shield. Inter Miami won the Supporters' Shield in 2024 after being 8 points clear on top of the joint table. That's the only time that a joint table is needed, as for all other purposes, both conference tables are utilized separately. The top 7 teams from each conference qualify for the round of 16 in the playoffs. This creates 2 available positions in the last 16, which the 8th and 9th ranked teams in each conference must compete for, leading into the wildcard round. Like in 2024, Montreal and Atlanta United came in 8th and 9th respectively in the Eastern Conference standings. They played a single game knockout, which Atlanta won on penalties. Similarly, 8th place Vancouver won against 9th place Portland in the Western Conference. Both winners of the wildcard round moved into the last 16 of the playoffs as 8th place seeds. At this point now, the first place team in both conferences are matched against the 8th place seeds from their own respective conferences. The second place team plays at home against the 7th place, and so on. This round of 16 is known as round 1 and features a best 2 out of 3 system. The first match is at the higher ranked team's home ground. Let's take Inter Miami versus Atlanta United as an example. The first match was at Miami's home, which they won 2-1. The second was at Atlanta Stadium, which again went to the home team. With the tally now tied at 1 game each, the need for a third match was triggered. The third game was at Miami's home again, but this time they lost it, which implied that Atlanta won the tie 2-1 and booked their place in the semis. Had Miami won the second game, they would have qualified for the semifinal without having to play the third match against Atlanta. After round 1, the semifinal and final are single game knockouts, at the end of which a single team remains from either conference. Finally, in December, the MLS Cup is played between the winners from each conference playoffs. The winner of such is deemed as the league champion. The Supporters' Shield and the MLS Cup are the two major domestic trophies to be claimed every season. There's another competition called the Leagues Cup, which involves every team from the MLS and Mexico's Liga MX coming together in a World Cup style league plus knockout tournament. Another trophy to vie for is the US Open Cup, which is like the equivalent of the FA Cup. It's the oldest competition in the country's football history and sees over 80 teams competing for the title. The one continental opportunity comes in the form of the CONCACAF Champions League. There are 4 spots up for grabs for this competition in the MLS. The top spots from both conferences are given a slot for the CONCACAF Champions League. The third spot is given to the winner of the MLS Cup, while the fourth one goes to the US Open Cup winner. The 3 Canadian clubs in the MLS also play in a domestic tournament called the Canadian Championship. Other Canadian clubs take part in the knockout style tournament as well. The final winner qualifies for the CONCACAF Champions League. There is no dearth of competitive matches and the number of teams in the MLS. The number is only steadily growing, as is the quality of football being played. The US national team has undergone impressive developments over the past few years, and their quality has drastically improved. Similar to Ronaldo's move to Saudi Arabia, Messi's move also paved the way for many high-profile players to subsequently join the league. From 2025, San Diego FC will make up the 30th club in the MLS. Over the last 8 years, 11 new world-class stadiums have popped up over the country, with more on the way. A more focused development of football coaching is also underway throughout the country as they prepare to host the upcoming 2026 World Cup. While there have been a few controversies around biases and favoritism, there is no denying that the league is at the height of its popularity in the modern era. As we've seen in the past, if the Americans get to it, they could definitely improve the standards of their league over time. But fiddling with the rules and formats too much might alienate the traditional enjoyers of the sport. American-made TV show Ted Lasso did wonders to warm up a lot of Americans to the idea of enjoying football, as did documentary series Welcome to Wrexham. With increasing crowds and more marquee signings, the MLS is on the up. But will they sustain these numbers once Messi retires? Messi's contract expires at the end of 2025, after which he may very well decide to return to Argentina or maybe just retire altogether. MLS should plan ahead of his departure if they want to sustain their popularity in the long term. Do you think the offbeat season schedule from February to December is a bad format? Should the MLS get in sync with the rest of Europe? Let us know below.